Okay, thanks for coming this morning. We're here to present the Green Party's vision of a sustainable Syracuse. And we brought, visual maps and drawings to illustrate our concepts about how we can rebuild Syracuse green. And we're here in the Crown Plaza, and you can look down where the community grid would go when the I-81 elevated highway comes down. But we're saying that should be the first of 3 civic and environmental highways that crisscross the city. The other 2 would include Onondaga Creek, which would be, we call it the Eco Development District, Garden City. There's a lot of space down there for urban farming. And if we redo the creek and de-channelize it so it has its natural course with ponds and low-head hydro dams and biological water treatment, we could have all kinds of interesting things along there that would be attractive. And then the other corridor would be the Erie Canal east and west. Basically redig the canal from Inner Harbor into downtown and out Erie Canal east. And that would be an eco-industrial park where we would have light industry, particularly using agricultural feedstocks from the South Side Agricultural District or the region's farms, as well as other things like solar panel manufacturing and environmental industries. And the grid is coming, and we got to do that right. And I think it wouldn't be long before we could begin redeveloping Onondaga Creek. The canal is longer term, but the point is to have a vision so that Syracuse isn't just everywhere USA and has nothing to offer. These big ideas on urban design would enhance the city's charm and beauty and make it an attractive gathering place for businesses, residents, workers, shoppers, and tourists to participate in commerce, recreation, education, politics, arts, and the culture. And also, if we have agriculture and manufacturing, we're adding value, real wealth, real goods to the economy, and that's the foundation economically for all the other parts of the economy, service, retail, and government. And if we're able to do that, we'll be more self-reliant and less dependent on the decisions of distant corporations, larger scales of government, and market forces. The core principle of sustainable Syracuse is neighborhood-directed development. We want to use green technologies and widespread community ownership to create living wage jobs and wealth for working families in this city and make it ecologically as well as economically sustainable. It means people plan the city. What we have now is default planning by private developers with the city sort of reacting to their plans. And it's haphazard. And we get bad design. If you look out these windows, you'll see parking lot after parking lot. There's even parking lots under the elevated highway. And this is in the heart of prime real estate in the center of the city. It's not a good use of land. Now, the community enterprises, as I said, strengthen the people's power as well as fairly share the wealth that we create by our labor. And there are a number of things I want to do to promote community-owned enterprises. And by that I mean owner-operated small businesses. Everybody understands that. I also mean community corporations like the Green Bay Packers, where the only people that can vote their shares are residents. That's why Green Bay, a city half the size of Syracuse, has an NFL franchise. Consumer cooperatives like grocery stores and credit unions that provide goods and services at cost to members, not for the profit of absentee owners. But the 2 forms I would emphasize most are public enterprise, public utilities, and worker cooperatives. We need a public power utility and a community broadband utility because the utilities or the big corporations that have been servicing us in that area have not delivered. We don't have high-speed fiber optics in this city. We're behind the times. And we are not moving fast enough toward renewable energy, and our power costs too much anyway. Right next door in Solvay, they pay 1/3 what we do for delivery and service charges, and they have a municipal utility. So the other thing the city should do to improve transportation is have the Department of Public Works take over the sidewalks, maintenance, and snow removal like they do for the city, or for the streets. And so these utilities are the public avenues of private commerce, and the better we provide for them, the more we're going to make this a good place to do business. These public utilities will lower the cost of living for residents and the cost of doing business in the city. And worker cooperatives should receive a high priority because they build business asset wealth as well as wage income for their members. And that's how we bring our high poverty city out of poverty, because most people who are poor are working. They just have low wages, and all the extra wealth they create go as profits to people that don't even live here. In particular, I think we can develop worker co-ops by having a partnership with the Eds and Meds on University Hill. And what they would do is provide long-term capital and markets for worker co-ops. They've done this in Cleveland. It's called the Evergreen Co-ops. And at University Circle, there's Case Western University, and there's Cleveland Clinic. And it's surrounded by a low-income African-American community. And what they've done is provide the capital for an industrial laundry, which then services the linens and uniforms at the hospitals. They created an urban farm, which provides fresh produce for the food services at the hospitals and universities. And they created a solar manufacturing installation cooperative. And we have that same situation here surrounding the university on the south side, and the near east side are low-income, predominantly minority communities. We have an abandoned industrial laundry on the south side. That could be the industrial laundry in this model. And the eco-industrial corridor the agricultural corridor we're talking about on the south side along Onondaga Creek could be where the co-ops for food services are. So I would like to bring that model to Syracuse. Another big part of sustainable Syracuse is we've got to rehabilitate our housing stock. So it's safe. We got to get the lead out. We should require landlords to get a lead-free certificate before they rent. We have the highest child poisoning in the country, highest child poisoning rate, so we got to deal with that issue. We're very hyper-segregated by race and class, and in fact, most segregated for blacks and Latinos, fifth most segregated for whites. That means they're concentrated in high poverty census tracts. And they call that concentration of poverty, but this segregation is the same thing. So we need inclusionary zoning. So all new projects include low income and upscale housing together. And we begin to break down this segregation. And then finally, we need more housing. 65% of Syracuse people rent, and half of them are paying more than 30% of their income for their rent, which is the federal standard of affordability. A third of those people are paying over 50%. So we need to build more affordable housing, and the private developers aren't doing it. I think we need to expand the kind of public development of affordable housing that the Syracuse Housing Authority is doing without, public housing money from the federal government. They're using the same low-income tax credits as private developers who do this have, and that's how they rehabilitated the Leonard Apartments on the near west side and are building the Freedom Commons on the south side. And we need to scale that up to provide enough affordable housing for all the people who are struggling in the city. Finally, I want to talk about how important public transportation is to this vision. As I mentioned, you look out here and all you see are parking lots. And most of these people are coming in from the suburbs and leaving. And they're wasting land. And if we had a good, affordable, convenient transportation system, they could come in and wouldn't have to park a car. And if you look at this map over here, it's a 1903 map of the streetcar system in Syracuse. And if you look at it, anywhere in the city, you're no more than 3 blocks, most of the cases 1 or 2 blocks, from a streetcar. And I know I've done a little research on this. The streetcar here that went around Thornton Park, there were 2 of them. And every 15 minutes, you could hop on a streetcar. Compare that to now with our buses. I know on the south side where I live, I will get in my car to go downtown. I'll see people at the bus stop. I'll spend an hour, hour and a half going about my business. I come back and they're still standing there waiting for the bus. It's just not an effective system. And some people have no choice, but they have to use that. So we've got to really improve our public transportation. Now, what you see here was done by a guy named Rob Marash, and he was working with a guy named Jake Roberts, who was a mayoral candidate in 2005. These things were developed in 2005 when I was a candidate for mayor, and Jake abandoned his campaign in support of mine, and we worked together on this. And these were presented originally as an alternative to Destiny USA, the big mall out there. The question was, were they going to get tax breaks on their property taxes so they wouldn't pay property taxes till 2035? And I predicted, there's a much more detailed position paper that you can find on my website that predicted that if we went ahead with that development and gave them the tax breaks, we would entrench low-wage poverty in the city, because that's what the jobs mostly are out there, low-wage, part-time. And we would undermine downtown and neighborhood business districts. And that's what's happened. The north side was supposed to boom because it was right next to Destiny USA, but the number of census tracts that are high poverty have quadrupled since 2000, and most of them are on the north side. So I think I was right about that prediction. I made another prediction in that paper. I said there's a housing bubble, and when it bursts, there are not going to be as many consumers, and the whole real estate thing that Conjure was trying to do, there wouldn't be credit for it. And guess what? 2 years later, 3 years later, 2007 and 8, 2 years after the 2005 election, then they got their tax break, the bubble burst, and Destiny USA didn't become all that it was supposed to be. If you remember the maps, it was going to be the biggest thing. More people were going to come here than Boston or Las Vegas. City got conned on that. And so I want to make another prediction today, and that is all these parking lots in about a decade are going to be obsolete because self-driving cars, autonomous cars are coming, and they'll be running around. They won't be parked. Most people won't have private cars. They'll just call up, and it'll be like personal rapid transit. And I'm saying the city needs to plan for that now and be thinking about what that means, and probably thinking about having a public utility to provide this service, because this is the kind of thing that will be naturally monopolized by Uber or Lyft or one of those companies. And private monopolies tend to extract extra costs from us. And because there's not competition or public control, not provide the best service. So that is basically the ideas behind Sustainable Syracuse. These 3 commercial and civic corridors and environmental corridors that can attract business, so we're not everywhere USA, but we're unique and attractive, and a place that people want to come and do business in. And it involves community ownership, community-owned enterprises, green technologies, clean energy, really rebuilding our housing stock. But the most important thing is that the people plan, neighborhood-directed development. These are ideas for discussion. They're not a final plan. It's really important that the people be involved, because if the people are not involved in making decisions, we're going to get screwed like we did with the Destiny USA project. And we need a new direction, or the city's going to be the victim of more exploitation. So, questions?
Yeah, what do you think can be done to attract more green businesses and people who are more interested in eco-friendly living to come to Syracuse?
I think developing the community grid, the organic agricultural corridor around Onondaga Creek, and the eco-industrial corridor along the Erie Canal will make this place unique, and people who have that interest will want to come here. And it builds upon strengths we have. We have pretty strong environmental services and engineering firms here. The Center of Excellence, you can see it right out the window, is the center for that. And what we need to do is have in this area along this eco-industrial park the kinds of businesses that will spin out of that Center of Excellence. I know they deal with air quality in buildings and the green what do you call it? Rooftop gardens. You can see them in this picture of downtown in the Sustainable Syracuse future. So I think those are the things that will attract those kinds of folks, as well as other people who just want to come here and make a buck, or just come here because they like the scenery, the parks, they like to fish. We have a lot of people like to fish. They fish in Onondaga Park. They can't eat them, although some of them do, unfortunately. I think another piece that we haven't talked about is we need a people's waterfront instead of the old junkyard for that salvage place, the Roth Steel, and the mall, and then we got a railroad track. Why aren't we taking advantage? We got a lake right on our edge of our city. We should have a beach out there. There's actually a green architect named David Ashley that has a model for that. He's retired, lives up in the Berkeley Park area. there's so many things we could do, and if we don't take advantage of, you know, the bold ideas that are workable, you know, city sort of says we can't do this, we can't do that, and that's not the way to get ahead. You know, I think we need to decide what we want to do and then figure out a way to get it done.
So you'd like to see the Erie Canal kind of go through Clinton Square, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, people still, when they're down there on Clinton Square, I've been down there with people from out of town, they love the architecture, and then they kind of close their eyes. The canal actually went by there. Wouldn't it be cool if it was still there? You know, like I said, I think it would add to the charm and beauty and attractiveness of the city. And people would come here. Look, they're rebuilding the canal in Buffalo just for that reason. They've done it in Providence. They've done it in some European cities where, you know, for some reason they wanted to bury the old canal. This was buried 100 years ago. Some people say, oh, all the utility lines are in there. Well, that utility stuff is 100 years later is wearing out. You know, and as I said, we got to upgrade our infrastructure. So I don't see that as an obstacle. You know, it'll be expensive, but you know, I think you have a plan and you build it in segments. So it doesn't have to be done in 1 year or with one grant or one big investor.
Yeah, do you know, do you have an estimate of like maybe how much your ideas would cost or where the funding would come from?
Well, the community grid, I think a lot of it would be private investment. It has to be within a plan that the city determines. South of Adams, Syracuse Housing Authority is already planning, and they have some access to public funds. I'm not sure how they plan to finance it, but I know, like I said before, they're doing, they're like public developers using tax credits that are intended for private developers. The other thing is we haven't costed out, but that would be the stage you do when you decide, well, let's really look at this seriously. At this point, the city is, you know, just sort of rezoning. They're doing a rezoning project, but they don't have any big urban design concepts that, you know, can take advantage of our unique characteristics, and that's what we're advocating here.
Where would you like to see a light rail go through?
Well, I think along the old Erie Canal corridor, we need major north, south, east, west for the commuters. But I really want to see a spider web like you had back in the 1903, you know? Everybody could walk to a streetcar and in about 15 minutes get on one. And it was cheap. That's how people got around. And then the streetcars were linked to low, what do they call it, narrow gauge rail. They could get up to Auburn or Watertown or, you know, Oswego. It was very effective. He's dead now. He almost lived to be, I think he did live to be 100. An accountant who grew up in New York City, and when I was running for governor, he was saying, talk about bringing back the narrow gauge railway. He said when he was a child, this is like 1920s, he used to just ride them around New York, and he could afford it as a child, teenager, and he could afford it. You know, he'd save a few bucks from his job, and he'd get on the rails, and he'd just visit all over upstate. And I think we need to bring that back. And if they could do it in 1903, there's no reason we can't do it now.
In Austin, they have a nonprofit ride-sharing app called Ride Austin, and you mentioned the potential for self-driving cars and ride-hailing apps. Do you see a future for Syracuse for a ride-hailing app that would either be incorporated as a nonprofit or as a worker-owned enterprise or as a publicly provided platform?
I do. You know, Uber and Lyft have come in, but they call this platform capitalism, and there's a logic toward monopolization, because the platform or the application that gets the most users has the most information, and then everybody wants to use that application because it's got the most information, and it tends toward monopolization very quickly. So Amazon's doing internet sales, and you know, I guess Uber has the upper hand in the battle with Uber and Lyft. And trying to remember what the other, well, Google is your search engine, and well, you get the idea. And I think that's the same kind of situation we're going to have here. So that's why I said, you know, we should start thinking about a public utility to provide that service. And I know down in Ithaca they've got that. In fact, the former Green city councilor down there runs that program in Ithaca. And Syracuse could use it for sure. Okay, thank you for coming.